What's the hardest teaching of our Lord to bear? Think about that. In your life, what's the hardest teaching of Jesus to bear? Indeed, Jesus has many teachings that are hard. Think of John chapter 6, the bread of life discourse, when Jesus says, "I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever, and the bread that I will give is my flesh for the life of the world." What happens? What's the response? The Jews quarrel among themselves, saying, "How can this man give us his flesh to eat?" Many of his disciples who were listening said, "This saying is hard. Who can accept it?" For every single one of us, the Eucharist is a hard teaching that demands faith. Yet would we say it's the hardest teaching? I recently heard the story of a man named Fernand. When he was in his 20s, he wanted to become a priest. He was preparing to enter the seminary, but he became paraplegic. A rare and strange disease paralyzed him. This man, Fernand, couldn't move anything but his head. No other part of his body could move, except for his thumb. And for more than 50 years, he was confined to a bed in a one-room apartment. And with that thumb, all he could do was squeeze a button that would open his door to guests. Here Jesus began to teach them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are they who mourn. Blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of evil against you falsely because of me. Rejoice and be glad." The Beatitudes. This, I would say, is the hardest teaching of our Lord. To bear the cross. To accept suffering and non-ideal circumstances in my life, even unjust circumstances or unjust suffering, the suffering that's undeserved, not my fault, but which has been inherited as a lot. To embrace this kind of suffering generously and with joy. I don't know about you, but could there be any teaching of our Lord that practically is more difficult to bear? The Eucharist, that I can bear. It's pure gift. The flesh of Jesus given to you and to me. Hard teaching to assent to, yes. But the way of life of the Beatitudes, the way of the cross, who can accept it? How many of us carry a cross through life around our neck? There's a man from Gilbert every Friday morning, 6:30 a.m., who comes to our men's group. Most often he comes wearing a crucifix and a silver chain around his neck. The truth is, every single one of us, whether we wear a necklace or not, we carry real sufferings in this life. The question is, what do we do with them? What do we do with our sufferings? Every Catholic knows this saying. Few of us like it. Offer it up. Offer it up. How many of us have the practice of truly and generously offering up our sufferings? We might even ask, how's that even done? What does that mean? Well, in fact, there is a place and a way to bring suffering, and I mean every kind of human suffering, before God, and to allow it to be transformed into a gift. A gift. Just to be clear, there are times that God takes away our suffering. He's able. And we're allowed to ask God to take away our suffering. Jesus himself pleaded with God in the garden, "Father, if it is your will, let this cup pass from me." But God didn't take it away. And we see Jesus allow his suffering to become his way of loving. His way of loving. It's not without meaning. And really, it's the greatest value of what Jesus gave us, his life on the cross. One of my instructors from seminary, Bishop Cousins, tells the story of meeting that man Ferdinand in his apartment. At every Mass, as we know, a crucifix is placed on the altar. It's the altar cross. And on this occasion, Bishop Cousins is going to celebrate Mass with Ferdinand in that one-room apartment. And as he was setting up, turns out that some of the others knew that Ferdinand kept a crucifix on his chest, just between his arms. And he kept it there to remind him that his suffering had value. That had value. It could become a gift. So some who were there in that one-room apartment, they took that crucifix, lifted it from his chest, and placed it on what would be their altar for the Mass. The altar. What a gift we have as Catholics in the altar. This is where we can bring our suffering. And we all have suffering to bring. We all have it to bring. When the baskets go for the collection, it's not just our envelope, but to place our very life, our sufferings, to be brought here, to be part of the Mass. This is how we're able to rejoice and actually be glad in this harsh and fallen world. This is where everything actually can take on meaning. It's the only place really in the world that can literally transform suffering into a gift. And so blessed are we who are able to come to the altar, who choose to come to the altar, who come carrying our necklaces, our crosses, and who lay them down, who join them to the cross of our Lord Jesus. Blessed are we who come to this supper, this offering of the Lamb.